This is the Cats Roundtable with John Catsimatidis.
Everywhere around the world, they come to America. Every time that flag's unfurled, they come to America.
Good morning, New York. This is the Cats Roundtable. John Catsimatidis here Sunday morning. With us today, Steve Cates. What's going on the moon? What's going on Mars? Michael LaPetri running for Congress in Long Island. Assemblywoman Jody Giglio. Senator Declan O'Scallion, and what's going on in Jersey? John Terrett, what's going on with the economy? Governor David Paterson. Ed Cox, the New York State chairman. Nicole Maliotakis, the only Republican congresswoman in the 5 boroughs of New York City. The head of the DEA for the Northeast, Frank Tarantino. And let's start and see how the real estate industry is going in New York, but Michael Stoller.
Good morning. This is Mike Stoller for the Stoller Real Estate Report. What's happening in the real estate market in New York City? What's happening with lending, financing, acquisitions, office to residential conversion, a variety of subjects, especially construction and the need for new housing in the city. So today I have Stephen Palmesi, who is the CEO and founder of Integritas Capital, correct?
Yep. Michael, thank you so much. My headset almost fell off.
Move closer, please.
Oh, Michael, yes, thank you so much. My headset almost fell off.
So what's going on? Tell me about the financing world.
You know, I'm effectively a 40-year-old guy who quit his job after 20 years in brokerage to start over to create a debt and equity platform. Consider us a smaller version of Madison Realty Capital with all deference to them. But really the efforts of what I'm doing began in 2012 when I started investing, which effectively was my night job while I was heavily in brokerage. And culmination of those efforts have led me to where we are today.
So would you say that you're predominantly a lender as opposed to an owner?
We have started owning in 2012 and prior to that. So I would think to you, given the amount of time in the space, we're more direct investors and developers. We started lending in 2019 on more of an ad hoc basis. And then watching the market change from LIBOR to SOFR, watching the markets freeze in 22 and 23, we then created a much more formal program called Integritas Capital, which is really a roll-up of our previous investments between myself and our investors. And
who are your investors?
My investor is a family that we've known for about 20 years. Their background is in real estate. They've built about 2.5 million square feet. So when we created the debt platform or the debt vertical of our platform, the focus specifically was on construction in a very hands-on oriented approach. And our focus on the business is much akin to how we would describe ourselves as a tier 1 independent developer. You self-perform your own work, which means that you are the GC and you do all the work yourself. You self-perform it. You've got a dedicated team for many years. It's not your first property. You have a long-term track record, and you use your own capital for your projects. You're not a syndicate. So we are deliberately trying to target, largely developers who I've known throughout the years when I was on my brokerage side, and now I've seen them develop, 30 years later and 30 projects later, and we want to sort of really get into those projects. And more specifically, we have dedicated resources on our own side. We're vertically integrated. We own interest in a concrete plant as well, so we perform our own foundation and superstructure. So we will meet, our borrower.
Are you requiring your borrower to do business with your subsidiary companies?
We do not. But what it does is it keeps us sharp. It allows us to meet them and their subs and understand where they're sourcing from, and it gives us a chance to keep ourselves sharp to see what pricing is and continuously compare how the markets are reacting. And so we've taken those efforts and we've pointed that directly at a lending platform for construction because it's consistent with what we know, but also allows us to put out a fair amount of capital.
And what's the pricing typically?
We are, but for one loan we made in November of 25, we've been about 650 over. And so we're a widespread group. We've put out actually $1 billion actually as of last week, which is our 24th month, so second year anniversary. Made our first loan in March of 2024, and as of just about last week, so 25 months later, we're at $1 billion.
So what are they, all construction loans?
Heavy construction and condo inventory or land acquisition. That's tend to be where we've been able to be competitive for given our pricing, right? We're trying to find and self-identify as, by looking for the spreads that were required for our returns, we're willing to go a little bit deeper in the stack. So, higher proceeds or higher loan to cost, or maybe there's a challenge. We closed a project last week in 6 days. There was a grouping of assets downtown, and there weren't estoppels, and it was a hairy situation. So we closed an acquisition and construction loan in 6 days. So, but we were able to get our pricing.
Now, you're doing a large loan in Jersey City, you said to me.
We are. That's pending to close in the next 3 weeks. But that's a labor of love. That's a 1 year of effort put together. It's a $220 million construction loan on a ground-up multifamily with a component of hotel in Jersey City. And consistent with our ethos, we are financing the independent sponsor in a market that's completely institutionalized. And we spent the better part of a year getting to know the borrower, learn about their capabilities. They have a deep track record of building and self-performing, but the critique would be that they have not built a high-rise before. It's a 53-story tower. So we needed to get very comfortable knowing that they can complete a tower. And so we don't use the word difficult as much as we use straightforward, and we believe that construction is straightforward. Once you get out of the ground, you've really mitigated your costs, and then you have a vertical assembly timeline moving above that.
I'd like to thank you for being here.
Thank you so much for your time.
The Cats Roundtable.
Calling in right now, we have Michael LePetri. He was an assemblyman in New York State from 2019 to 2021. And now he is running for Congress in the 3rd Congressional District. And Michael LePetri, good to talk to you. What's going on with your congressional desire?
Thanks, John, for having me. Very excited for what's ahead. 2 years ago, we came within just 2-3 percentage points of victory. We've now been declared by President Trump, endorsed by President Trump, as well as Speaker Johnson and all of House leadership, as one of the top target seats to flip back into Republican hands to protect the House majority and ultimately execute upon President Trump's policies and ideas to put more money in our pockets to keep our communities safe and to keep our country safe by focusing on putting American citizens first.
Whose seat are you running? Who are you running against in Long Island?
We're running against two-faced Tom Suozzi, who says one thing and votes a completely different way. Somebody voted for the largest tax increase in federal history since World War II. Somebody who voted against the SAVE Act, which would have implemented voter ID to keep our elections safe. Somebody ultimately raises the cost of living while ensuring the quality of life goes down. I saw it firsthand. I was with the Secretary of Energy, Chris Wright, today, focusing on the NYC pipeline to institute diversified energy sources that ultimately will create affordable, reliable, and secure energy from all different types of sources. Tom Suozzi is somebody that voted 100% of the time with Biden, which raised our cost of living, which raised energy prices, which raised how hard it is to live and work on Long Island and Northeast Queens, which is in my district, and affordable energy for all. I'm excited for what's ahead. That's only going to happen if we have Republicans in the House of Representatives to ensure that does happen. And that's why this race, people are voting Mike LePetri for Congress as the next generation voice for our future. I'm a millennial. I live here, work here. I believe in protecting our home, and I want to make sure we have a voice for all.
Is there any other particular issues in Long Island that you feel that that you must bring to people's attention?
Absolutely. I mean, affordability as a whole, right? Being able to buy a home, raise a family, take care of the kids that you want for your family. All that. We have new ideas, new policies that we're going to be pushing forward in the forthcoming months when people see what Mike LePetri is all about. Protecting our communities, making sure we're curtailing crime, focusing on legal immigrants and not illegal aliens. It's important we enforce our laws, not ignore our laws as Democrats want to do. I believe in safe, secure, and affordable communities for all, and we're going to get that done this November by voting Republican Mike LaPetri for United States Congress.
And your website is?
Mike LaPetri for Congress.com. You can follow me on social media, X, Facebook, Instagram, at Mike LaPetri. You can see what I'm about. You want to reach out to me, I'm always here. It's important we have transparent leadership that actually does what needs to be done and do what's right, not what's easy.
Well, Mike LaPetri, thank you for calling in. Well, we need common sense in Congress. You sound like a common sense guy.
Thank you so much, John.
Thank you, and thank you for calling in today. Thank you. Thank you for listening to the Cats Roundtable. We'll be right back right after this break. Welcome back to the Cats Roundtable. With us today is Governor David Paterson. Well, Governor, what do you feel like this morning?
Well, John, the president was really upset Thursday, and he was calling everybody out. And I don't know if people drank truth serum Thursday night or whatever it was, but by 7:30 Friday morning, there was a negotiated agreement to open up the Straits of Hormuz. A lot of this came from the interest, apparently that the Iranians had because of the positive conversation between Lebanon and Israel. Now, remember, on Thursday, the president of Lebanon, Joseph Aoun, would not talk to the prime minister of Israel, Bibi Netanyahu, but they got that straightened out. And so we are looking at a period right now where the Straits of Hormuz are going to be open for a while, and that's going to feed the negotiation to a certain extent. Now, for us back here in the United States, the market went up 800 points almost when the news came out on Friday morning. But one thing we have to be careful about is, for instance, we have oil prices over $4, and we want them back to $3. They're not going to go back that quickly because the gas stations and also the refineries are not going to get put in a position where they can't come up with the product at the pump or in the warehouse or wherever that is. But as long as we can live with that for a few weeks, this could be, and I say could be, a tremendous opportunity moving toward peace. And obviously, if we get that kind of peace, we have to understand that right now it takes a lot, now that the straits are open, for the ships to go in and out of there. They have to reload. There are a whole lot of things they have to do, and no one's stalling. It just takes that long. But I think if we can just trust that everybody was willing to follow the agreement, then in the next 2 weeks, things could even be a lot better than they are now.
If we get rid of all the terrorists in the world, and Iran is the center of terrorism, and then bring down oil prices, which they're headed down. They were down to almost $10 a barrel on Friday, and bring down interest rates, I think you're going to have an economy in 2026 that will be phenomenal.
I think that this may actually be the first real positive step toward, and I hate to use the word peace, because in that area of the world, you never know how long peace is going to last. And God, when October 7th of 2023, when the Israelis were attacked, nobody saw that coming. But at the same time, the major players seem to really want to work this out. I think they got the kick in the rear end from President Trump that they kind of deserved. And I'll never understand why other presidents prior to him, I can't think of any time when any of them really just took on a problem and threatened the people who were trying to stop us from reaching some kind of international agreement. I'll just never understand that.
You know what still bothers me, Governor? NATO.
Tell me.
We saved their behinds, France especially. We saved their behinds in World War I and World War II, and now they turned their back.
Yeah, they wouldn't even send over some supplies when the conflict broke out a couple of months ago in the first place. By the way, there is a lot of data that apparently is out there that NATO is trying to become a government unto itself. In other words, where everybody would throw their debt in and also what their worth is. And this would be the way to buy machinery and to try to arm themselves in case they had some kind of conflict. I have no idea why they would be doing that, because I have no idea if anything started happening to them again, they would never be able to build the resources to protect themselves. They would be reliant on the United States of America.
Anything else on your mind this Sunday morning?
What we always have to understand with these situations is it looked great on Friday. Things seem to be coming together today. If everybody in this particular situation abides by what they agreed to, it really turns the whole issue into a possibility of some kind of settlement, because in this world right now, with all the problems we face, that would be a major accomplishment.
The president was very upset on Thursday and Friday with what's going on in New York City, New York State with taxes.
The president withheld, first they said 73 million, and then they said 74 million. You know, the interest rates go up very high now. That was withheld for transportation funding to New York by the president. The reason was that there were certain types of tests that where you go in and you have your car looked at and they make sure that you're not a danger, that your car can actually drive and that kind of thing, and maintenance, and that's a sort of thing that was not performed by New York. Before New Yorkers just think that Trump dislikes them, the same tests were performed by New Jersey, and they got their money. We didn't get our money because of our refusal to comply with this request, which was mandatory. So what I'm suggesting to anybody who has any decision-making capacity in New York, like whoever's the head of the Department of Transportation, see the $73 million that was not sent as a fine. In other words, they could have sent the money and then fined us, but they didn't send it. So it's a fine. And what they need to do is clean up their act. And even though President Trump says some unsettling things about New York State, I don't think he would be so petty that he just wants to pull $73 million out, particularly right now with the increase in automobile crashes. You hear all these commercials, if you're hurt in a crash, just dial 800 something. Well, a lot of that's happening because the actual vehicles that we're driving are not up to par. And that's what I think needs to be done. And John, don't write this down, but the president was right.
I won't write it down. Well, David Patterson, thank you for all your common sense, and we'll catch up again real soon.
Thank you, John.
The Cats Roundtable.
With us is Congresswoman Nicole Mayotakis. We hope. I'm glad you won that Supreme Court hearing, Nicole. And what's ahead of us?
Well, John, look, it's always one battle after another here in the city of New York right now. My constituents, Staten Island, Brooklyn, and people across the city are all up in arms about the new mayor placing homeless shelters all across the city without really any type of community input or involvement or transparency. And it raises a big red flag, John, because I think you saw, as so many others did, how there was a federal indictment unveiled last week where either elected officials or relatives of elected officials and politically connected people were indicted for a pay-to-play scheme as it relates to these shelters. So what's happening is these property owners are claiming they're going to build hotels in communities, by the way, like that don't need a hotel. There's no tourism there. And then they do a bait and switch and enter into a contract with the city of New York for a very high amount of money. Now, in some cases, when you break down these contracts, it could be around $10,000 a month per unit. In fact, on Staten Island this weekend, massive protests, Midland Beach, by residents who are up in arms over a contract that, when you break it down, it's about $9,600 a month per unit, which is more than twice what a person on Staten Island pays monthly on their mortgage. So it's ludicrous, John, and these things need to be investigated, and I'm working diligently to put together the documents to urge Department of Justice to investigate them.
How did we get that such a mess where in almost every city or every state that people are just having loose ends?
Well, look, at the end of the day, elections have consequences, John, and when you vote for a socialist, this is the type of policy you're going to get. But the worst part is it's not only a real scam that's ripping off the taxpayers. They're fleecing the taxpayers. But in addition to that, they're not even helping the homeless. They are warehousing the homeless. They have stopped so many of those programs, whether it be like workforce training, welfare to work programs, to help people transition out of the shelter system and become self-sustainable. The mental health, the substance abuse, they're not getting the treatment that they deserve. They've made these programs revolving doors, John. And so when you open up a shelter, for example, in the middle of the South Shore on Staten Island, where there is not adequate transportation, this is why everyone on Staten Island drives, and you don't have those underlying services for substance abuse or mental health, that creates a problem. And you have 150 single men where we don't even know where they're from, because we know that they're emptying out the jails in Rikers. Are these people with criminal history? We have no idea, because the city's not being transparent. But what I could tell you, John, because I did a Freedom of Information law request, when I did a FOIL request on the migrant shelters, I found that 16,000 crimes were committed by the thousands of individuals that were residing in these shelters at taxpayer expense. And they were here illegally on top of it. And so that's why I worked so hard with President Trump to secure the border, to close these shelters, and deport these criminals, the gangs that were wreaking havoc on the streets of our city. But look, if they're going to empty up Rikers and stick people in shelters, we're going to have problems in communities all across the city.
What do you look forward to accomplishing next?
I think the work that President Trump and his administration are doing right now is going to make America safer, as well as the world. And the developments over the last couple of days, hearing that Iran is opening up the Strait of Hormuz, hearing that they're going to turn over the enriched uranium, hearing that there's, hopefully the ceasefire can stick between Israel and Lebanon. These are important components. Also, the mines that Iran was placing at the bottom of the strait that were very dangerous for these ships to pass through, that they are removing them. These are all great developments. Obviously, these are reported developments. The president's talked about it. We still need some clarity and some confirmation. But if all this truly is happening, I think that we're weeks away, if not less, from this conflict ending, and the world will be a safer place. You're cutting off the funding for terrorist organizations, Hamas, Hezbollah, the Houthis. You've rid the world of the Ayatollah, who was directing all of this and not just killing Americans and attacking our military bases, threatened to assassinate our president and wreak havoc and terrorism in our own land. But we're killing their own people in Iran. So I think the world will be a safer place if we can make more of these agreements and then add more countries into the Abraham Accords and build on that success of President Trump's first administration.
Congresswoman Nicole Mayotakis, thank you for everything you do for our city, our country, and let's catch up again real soon.
Great to be with you, John. Thank you.
Thank you for listening to the Cats Roundtable. We'll be right back right after this break. Welcome back to the Cats Roundtable. With us is Ed Cox, the GOP chairman of New York State. Ed Cox, the president is very angry about what's going on in New York City, New York State. Give us your reading on it.
John, the president loves New York City, and he is just very upset at what Mayor Mondani is doing. The budget, the all funds budget for New York City is $113 billion. By the way, Florida is about the same, $118 billion, and they're doing pretty well in every area, whether it's education or whatever. So that's just a marker for it. In that budget, it is a $5.5 billion budget gap, or 5% of it. And Mondani proposed to solve that with a 2% New York City income tax on people who earn 1 million or more than 1 million. But that doesn't fly in Albany. So then he moved on to, all right, if we can't do that, we're going to raise real estate property taxes by 9.5%. The city council voted against that. That was a hell no, because all their constituents of the city council members, they are concerned about the cost that they have to pay for their housing or for their business properties. So that was a non-starter. Now he has turned to a tax the rich. He feels that, and the governor has backed him up on this, that he's going to get a pied-à-terre tax, in quotes. That's only going to produce $500 million. It's going to be a tax on homes that with values of more than $5 million that are second homes. And he went after a guy named Ken Griffin specifically. On April 15th, tax day, he stood in front of a building and said, the CEO of Citadel, Ken Griffin, bought this apartment for $200 million. Ken Griffin moved his whole business from Chicago because of crime and because of taxes to New York. He is now building the tallest building on Park Avenue to house his staff that now works all over the city. And he has actually moved his headquarters down to Miami. And I suspect that given what Mondani is saying here, he would frankly like to move his whole business down to Mondani. But we've got to save New York. We can't be attacking businessmen in very specific terms. This is what radical socialism is about. It's about the politics of envy. Oh, look, he's making so much money. Let's tax him. And just for the sake of taxing. For example, the city council, the speaker, Menon, has actually gone through the budget with the chair of the Ways and Means Committee, and they say that you can save $6 billion in the budget. You can solve the budget gap by cutting inefficiencies, auditing agent expenses, and doing reestimates. Within 2 hours, Mondani, in a very formal setting, accused the city council of proposing big cuts in programs, and the city council almost unanimously came back and, you are lying, Mr. Mayor. That's not what we're proposing. We're proposing cutting inefficiencies, auditing agency spending, doing reestimates. That's the way we can balance this budget. So he sees taxing the rich just to tax the rich, rather than working with the city council to come up with real savings that work and working through the budget, so opposed to real work and the kind of stuff that's required to balance the budget. He is just going after people just because of their wealth, and he's going after the city council, basically, and the city council has responded by calling him a liar. That's not a good way to start politically. As for his
now, let me ask another question.
Yeah.
When we discriminate against any one group, shouldn't there be discrimination if they're discriminating against whether it's the real estate industry or discriminating against police officers? Pick a group.
Yeah, but that's the way radical socialists work. They work the politics of envy, and they say, see, those people over there are doing better than you, so let's get rid of them. Let's get rid of their riches. And then they turn on in the end, you end up like Cuba. Cuba is the ultimate result of what radical socialism does. It was once the most prosperous countries in Latin America. It was booming. And then Fidel Castro came in pretending he was the big Democrat, kicked out the evil Batista dictator, etc., and he put in his radical socialism. Now it is the poorest country in Latin America. Anyone who's traveled down there, I know you have, John, it is just, when you get into the streets, it's just pathetic what you see. You see a once great country. When I was there in 1987, you'd ask for, when was that building built? Just before any new building was built just before the revolution. Nothing, there's just a lack of complete energy. When you take that kind of freedom away from people, freedom to prosper, to pursue happiness, in the words of the Declaration of Independence, when you take that away from people and give it to the government, the people just are not empowered to do their very best.
Well, Ed Cox, thank you for coming on this Sunday morning, and let's pray for America that we have some common sense prevail.
You bet, John.
The Cats Roundtable.
Well, with us today is Jody Giglio. She was a businesswoman that decided to become an assemblywoman to try to straighten out Albany. Well, you got your hands full, Jody Giglio.
This is my 6th year up there, and I am on the Ways and Means Committee now for 2 years. So when you watch what comes across my desk, you just say, with all the people that are leaving New York because we are so unbusiness friendly, we are chasing them away and then begging them to come back. It's ridiculous that the government tried to take my property, and that's how I got. That's how I
remember that. It was about 6-7 years ago.
Government. Yeah, my 146 acres in East Quogue.
Yes.
And then, so I look at this stuff that's going on, and I look at the races that are coming up and the people that are running for office, and it's all the Democratic Socialists of America that are being backed. They're backing these people to run, and it's very frightening because you're seeing a lot of good people that were moderate Democrats in Albany that are packing up, and they're going too. They say, we're getting the heck out of here. We're not going to be responsible for what's happening here with the budget, but the energy policies are holding up the budget. But, if you think about the debt that New York State is in, I mean, I asked Ways and Means on Friday. They told me $200 billion. Our budget is proposed to be $260 billion. $200 billion, and 77.2 of our debt payments are interest. 77.2%.
Well, it gets worse, Jody. Florida has 24 million people. New York State has 19.5, 19.8. And in Florida, the Medicare or Medicaid payments were $33 billion, and New York State was $100 billion. I thought they had more old age people in Florida.
They're giving away the store. And as the federal government clamps down even more and does the probes and the investigations, they're just adding it into the budget, saying the federal government's going to cut this from us, so we're going to add it into the budget now and make New Yorkers pay for it.
Well, that is crazy. And my problem with Riverhead, we have the largest terminal in the east coast of the United States, just about.
Yeah.
And we could bring down the price of gasoline in your assembly district, in that whole area, but substantially. They won't let us do one. They want a concrete thing to put the mixer on. I mean.
You remember way back when I helped you open up the Metro Biofuels in Grumman, in the former Grumman facility.
Yes.
And, everyone was very concerned about that and the restrictions of Article 12 with the Suffolk County Department of Health Services. It was all topic of discussion, and we got through it. And when I was in Riverhead, I helped you try and get through it, too. And you made a lot of concessions, especially with the trucks not going on the local roads and using the county roads that were, had a little more depth as far as the, asphalt is concerned, and then they were just built stronger. It's you made a lot of concessions.
And Jody Giglio, Riverhead, all the people up there, I just want them to be able to buy gasoline cheaper and heating oil cheaper.
And you had a great plan to come down the middle of the farm field, and it was instead of going on the local road. We got to keep pushing forward, right? And
we need
know
more.
What the benefits are.
We should have more business people in politics and less lawyers maybe in politics.
Yes, well, the lawyers are going because the outside income is restricted. And as you know, all of my investments and my retirement is based on the buildings that I built and the income that I have from those buildings. So, but everybody else is strapped with this $35,000 outside income. So if you're in the state assembly or the Senate, you can't make more than $35,000 a year in outside income starting January of 2027. So anybody that's got a business, whether it's an optometrist, whether it's a doctor, whether it's a pharmacist, whether it's a banker or an insurance guy, they're not coming to run the state of New York, which is scarier than we think, because you're going to get more of the community advocates that are standing on the corner of a 50-story building saying, I got that building knocked down, and they'll be voted in forever.
Jody Giglio, Assemblywoman, Thank you for your common sense. Teach some common sense up in Albany, and we'll catch up with you again real soon.
Sounds great, John.
Let's go to New Jersey. And with us today is State Senator Declan Oskayan. He's from Monmouth County. Senator, you guys lost another congressional race in New Jersey last week.
We lost the congressional race last week. We lost the gubernatorial race in November. Things are not going well for Republicans in New Jersey right now. I think mostly because of issues outside of New Jersey. If you poll people here about the practical issues here, Republicans should be winning. It's just not the climate right now. We can improve our messaging. There's a lot of things we can improve. We're doing a lot of postmortems, but there's a lot of ground to make up, and we need to be at it, and we're trying.
What is bothering you? What things that are going on in Jersey?
Well, look, the biggest issues facing New Jersey are budgetary, and they are significant. The previous administration, the Murphy administration, left us with essentially a $4 billion structural deficit. That's on a $60 billion budget. And that is a real problem. We squandered many opportunities to fix our budget. And this new administration it is a Democrat administration. It's not my choice, but they're going to have to work with us. They should work with us because Republicans have been right about our budget direction and the various things impacting it, school funding being at the top of the list for years. There is interest in working together. We've formed a good start of a working relationship. So I'm going to remain optimistic, but our options are dramatically less than we had at the start of the Murphy administration. You could almost easily have solved our fiscal problems with school funding reform, with some minor prospective pension and health benefits reforms. We could really be in a different spot. We are not. So it's going to be a tough thing. And, God willing, President Trump's policies lead to the kind of economic growth that he has predicted will happen. Hopefully the end of these wars as well will supercharge our growth, and we will have an amazing next, 4 to 7 years, and we'll grow our way out. It's hard for me to absolutely count on that. We're going to need some reforms as well. So we're here, and we're working at it every day.
Are you going to get energy from those windmills that were put up by the environmentalists and doing harm to the environment instead?
Well, it's interesting, and there's some debate about the harm to the environment, but let's stipulate there is some negative there. But windmills, offshore wind, does not make mathematic sense. And that I did a quick back of the envelope calculation when the Murphy administration announced that they were going to absolutely depend on a massive number of these windmills off our coast, and it didn't make sense. And it actually collapsed in on itself. I know that some of my friends on the other side of the aisle like to blame the President Trump for the downfall of wind energy. Wind energy was collapsing while President Biden was still in office.
Absolutely.
The very first Ørsted project here in New Jersey that was approved and subsidized completely fell apart while Joe Biden was the president. So the downfall of wind has nothing to do with President Trump's policies. It has to do with the fact that offshore wind doesn't make economic sense.
New Jersey State Senator Declan Oskayan, thank you so much for coming on this Sunday morning, and we'll catch up with you again real soon.
Thanks, John. I appreciate it. Thanks for having me.
Thank you for listening to the Cats Roundtable. We'll be right back right after this break.
Pepsi Prebiotic Cola in original and cherry vanilla. That Pepsi taste you love with no artificial sweeteners and 3 grams of prebiotic fiber. Pepsi Prebiotic Cola. Unbelievably Pepsi.
Welcome back to the Cats Roundtable. With us is Frank Tarantino, and he's the Associate Chief of Operations for the Drug Enforcement Administration and in the whole Northeast region. Frank Tarantino, are we ever going to make America drug-free?
Yes, that's our ultimate objective, is to make the United States of America drug-free, and specifically we have an operation that our administrator has titled Fentanyl-Free America, and that's something that we dedicate our men and women to every single day, and protecting the United States is of the utmost priority. But I want to talk today, John, about some complementary work that we do to our enforcement operations, and that's the National Prescription Take-Back Day that comes up twice a year. It's coming up this Saturday, the 25th of April, and there's 4,000 locations around the United States of America. And what it is, it's an opportunity for the community to really partake in this effort to keep our safety and our security at the utmost in the minds of our young people in our community by taking their prescription drugs that are unwanted, unused, to these locations to drop off for destruction. And, it's a tremendous effort that we have had for the last 16 years across the country, 30 different operations, John. And over the course of those 30 operations, we've had a total of over 20 million prescription medication 20 million pounds of prescription medication dropped off at these locations. So that's a tremendous effort and a incredible amount of prescription drugs that are, again, unwanted, unused, taken off the streets and potentially saved lives.
Right now, with all the boats President Trump and our military has knocked out coming in from Venezuela, and all the precautions that we're taking with the Mexicans cartels, give us the overall. Are drug sales down? I mean, is it getting tougher to get drugs in the Northeast area?
There's always this challenge in drug law enforcement to stay ahead of the traffickers in their adaptability, their innovative and creative efforts to move their poison from Mexico into the United States. And every time we shut down a critical entry point or we investigate and disrupt an organization, they sort of morph into a new area and develop a new technique. So we're always trying to stay ahead of them, and they're always using new technology and new smuggling techniques. But I will tell you that we're having a tremendous amount of success. Overdose deaths are over 25% down from last year. We're at about 84,076 in comparison to 112,323. So we've seen a tremendous amount of overdose deaths decline, and we've also seen the purity levels decline in the seizures that we have. We see less fentanyl powder on our city streets, but it's still an effort every single day to go out and identify these organizations and to remove that poison. And that's something I want to talk about next week when we talk about the Fentanyl Free America surge that's ongoing. And we've had a number of successful operations in New York City and throughout the Northeast that I think will illustrate this work.
Are there some countries that are drug-free?
That would be the North Star. That would be the ultimate objective for any country. And that's certainly within reason here in the United States. If we continue to work collaboratively, if we continue to put pressure on these drug cartels, if we continue to work as a whole of government, we will have that kind of success, and we will eventually reach that point where we can save more lives and keep that poison, out of our schools, out of our communities. Our youth are worth this effort. That the safety and security of this country depends on our ability to protect our young people and protect our communities and to keep that poison off the streets, to keep the violence out of our inner cities. Like, this is an effort that every single DEA agent, intelligence analyst, diversion investigator, every single professional within the DEA is committed to every day.
What else do you want to talk about on a Sunday morning to all the American people?
Well, John, I'd like for the American people to, again, understand the importance of the National Prescription Take-Back Day, and I want them to take this opportunity when they hear this conversation between you and me and they hear other public service announcements, to have conversations with their young children, to have conversations with people that maybe are vulnerable to substance use dependency, because the people that have conversations, we see a 50% decline or less likely to develop a substance use disorder. And what we find is only 22% of the kids that we interview have had any conversations with an adult or with a caregiver about the dangers surrounding illicit drug use or the abuse of illicit drugs. So we want the conversations to happen in the home. We believe that the community can help us. We believe a community problem is solved by the community, and we want the American people to help us, help them to keep America safe.
Frank Tarantino, thank you for everything you've done in the past and continue to do. God bless you and God bless America.
Thank you, John.
The Cats Roundtable.
With us is Steve Cates, otherwise known as Dr. Sky. Well, Steve Cates, what do you got for us on a Sunday morning?
Well, good morning. Happy Sunday, John. Lots of exciting topics. Many people may be wondering what's next after that epic success with NASA's Artemis 2. Now they're going to change the entire schedule to get to the moon. Artemis 3 was supposed to be the one that lands, but now, John, Artemis 3 will be a test flight in orbit as hopefully either SpaceX or Jeff Bezos' company build the next lunar lander. They don't have these ready yet. So that mission, which should take place sometime around mid-2027, you have to test this stuff before you land on the moon, because Starship, Elon Musk event that he's building, or item, is called the HLS, the Human Landing System. It's tall, John. It's 172 feet high, and it doesn't have those big wide legs like the Apollo lander. And Jeff Bezos' one is called the Blue Moon. It's shorter by 52 feet, but it looks like it has more of those landing, legs like a spider leg. So we hope that eventually with Artemis 4, humans may get to the moon by maybe sometime late 2028.
You know, we learned something a couple of years ago, Steve Cates. Me and you learned it, and that you shouldn't have something that lands on the moon that is easily capable of tilting over.
Absolutely. Take a look, ladies and gentlemen, in your mind's eye, or take a look at pictures. The lunar lander had these wide separated legs. Now, this is not to knock the people at, SpaceX, but if you're talking about a 172-foot tall vehicle, which has a very small surface on the bottom, you're right, John. Many of the Apollo landings didn't land on flat ground. Apollo 15 landed on maybe a 12 or 15-degree incline, but those wide legs helped them land safely. So I think they have to work the bugs out. But just in case people are concerned, Artemis 3 is not landing on the moon. It's going to test the landers once they build them in Earth orbit before we go on.
I hope me and you live long enough to see them land on Mars.
I hope so, John, and maybe being very optimistic, but always honest, that may not happen if they're delaying lunar landers. We have to get that technology, some say mid-30s, 2030s, and that might be optimistic, indeed. Now we go to the mystery of the week, and here we go. This one's even the most bizarre one we could talk about. The question is time an illusion? Because, John, physics equations do not specify a present moment, like you and I are talking as people are hearing this. But the flow of time is a construct that many believe is simply created inside of our brain. Now, how does that make any sense? The big force in the universe is gravity, and Einstein proved this, John, that gravity warps time. So the whole thing, maybe everything that we see in this world, as far as time, it sounds crazy, but it may also be an illusion, and that's the stuff that we have to figure out in what's called quantum physics.
Tell us, Steve Cates, has anything else come out on the other side of the moon? Anything they saw or anything unusual?
Yes, John, they saw something very interesting. A lot of times when people, of course, flew those lunar missions on Apollo, they were too close to the surface of the moon. But these astronauts on Artemis 2, they planned it so they'd fly about 4,000 miles above the moon. John, they actually saw impacts, flashes of light on the far side of the moon, meaning in the darker regions. That's incredible, and it goes to testify for this problem. If they could visualize seeing those items strike the surface of the moon and flash up, that tells us that when we build habitation on the moon, not to scare anybody who's a future astronaut, but we have to have some kind of habitation module. Even a small rock the size of a pebble, John, even smaller, could penetrate an astronaut spacesuit. And then God help us when we have the ones the size of vehicles and even bigger ones that create these giant craters. So they saw something unusual when they went through that far side of the moon. That's amazing.
Well, the one thing they're not telling us about is if the astronauts traveling for 8 months, 9 months to Mars, if they can take that much radiation.
You know, John, that's a big one. And the NASA people on this particular mission, they flew slightly in the outer areas of the Van Allen belt where radiation exists. But the truth is, we have a long way to go with biomedicine and, of course, space medicine to determine how to shield a spacecraft and make it on those long-duration missions. Because what happens, John, if a mega solar flare blasts out, we have to be prepared for the excess, not just a certain mid-level of radiation. And that's a big challenge. That's something we have to overcome.
Thank you, Steve Cates, and we'll talk to you again real soon.
Thank you, John. Have a great Sunday, and to the listeners.
With us to give us a financial report is John Cherrett. John, it seems to be a good week this week.
Well, it certainly was, wasn't it? With the S&P 500 crossing over 7,000 for the very first time midweek and then staying there. And ending last week ahead by 3% for 3 weeks in a row. Now, that is unheard of. No one has ever heard of that happening in our lifetimes. And the reason is investors are looking past the war and acting as if it wasn't happening at all. And indeed, they saw an end to the war as early as midway through last week. They're looking instead at corporate earnings, which are up about 15% in the first quarter so far, including the big banks, which did very well, especially Morgan Stanley, turning in $1 billion more in trading revenue than Wall Street had anticipated. So a good week and a good day on Friday for the Dow, the NASDAQ, and the S&P. Oil crashing. I know you wrote to me on Friday morning and said oil is crashing, and so it was, down by between 10 and 13%, because also on Friday we learned from the Iranian foreign minister that the Strait of Hormuz is now open, although I think it's only partially open. Between you and me, that's just my opinion. President Trump backed that up as well. He said that the Iranians had agreed to basically be very careful about any uranium enrichment that they might do in the future, and in fact had agreed to an unlimited suspension of it. We knew on Friday there were talks planned for Pakistan over the weekend, although the Iranians did say that the U.S. blockade of the strait was a violation of any ceasefire. So we'll see how it plays out in the course of the next week. Corporate news was amazing with a capital A. How about Netflix? Second quarter miss as far as Wall Street is concerned, and Reed Hastings, the guy who co-founded the company, exiting his position as chairman of the board in June. Netflix was down about 8% on that news, and then down 9% on Friday. United Airlines boss apparently floated a merger with American Airlines in the White House a couple of weeks ago, according to Bloomberg. If this happens, they'll control 1/3 of all air travel and be the biggest airline on the planet. On the other side of the coin, Spirit Airlines is facing liquidation because of very high fuel costs, because of the Iran situation. A federal jury found Live Nation liable of manipulating ticket prices. A breakup is on the cards if a judge decides so, but don't expect ticket prices to come down anytime soon. They are going to appeal this for a very, very long time. The big surprising story of the week was Allbirds from California. They make shoes. Wool Runner, Tree Runner, Canvas Breeze are their top brands, but they're coming out of shoes. In fact, they've sold the business and going instead into AI. They've renamed the company, and the stock was up 650% one day last week, although it was down a bit towards the end of the week, and then I think back up on Friday. Mark Mobius, who I'm sure you know, John, 89 years old, the man who brought emerging market investment to Wall Street, he passed away last week. And Kevin Walsh, who is the tip to be the new Fed chair. Turns out he has a lot of crypto exposure in his personal finances. He's revealed that, of course, as he has to, before appearing before the Senate Banking Committee for hopefully confirmation on Tuesday. And John, in the week ahead, more big corporate earnings for the first quarter, Tesla, Boeing, and Intel among them. John.
Well, thank you so much, and we'll catch up with you again next week.
Thank you, John.
Thank you for being with us for the Cats Roundtable Local Edition, the #1 show on Sunday mornings in New York. Keep listening to us for the Cats Roundtable National Edition between 9 o'clock and 10 o'clock. So we'll be back to you in a few minutes after the news.